Welcome to the Middle Ages, a podcast hosted by two women in midlife navigating the wild, liberating, and often hilarious realities of this chapter of life. With a mix of insight, irreverence, and real talk, they explore everything from changing bodies and shifting identities to evolving relationships, work, and purpose. Because midlife isn't a crisis, it's a whole new beginning.
Hello, my friend.
Hello, my friend. How are you?
Good. I'm getting myself mentally prepared for our 80s night tonight.
We are going to have so much fun. Fun.
Imagining what I'm going to do with my hair. It's going to be very, very teased out. We're going to have some blue eyeshadow, and I'm going to be very accepting of myself as an 80s queen.
So I showed you what I wanted to do with my hair, like tease and put it up. And you called it what kind of a bug's nest?
Bug catchers. Yeah.
Bug catchers. I've never heard that term.
Remember when we had our hair like straight up, like all the bugs would get caught in it?
Yeah. So in the 80s, I had a Tina Turner perm. So I was like late teens, early 20. I was born in 65. So early to mid 80s, late teens, early 20s. I had a Tina Turner massive, like it's called a root perm. So like my hair was big. And I would go, if I was going out, I kind of dressed pretty, let's quotation marks, normal, typical when I'd go to school or go to work. But if I was going out, I would have like fishnet stockings, a white leather mini skirt, a very bright orange, like off the shoulder sweater, some jewelry, a big thick orange belt. That was, and of course the blue eyeshadow. So I lived the 80s and I loved the 80s, and I'm so excited to do the 80s tonight. And just for those of you listening, Steph and I are going to an 80s revival live concert tonight.
I was like 10 to 15 years old in the 80s. And so I was just I was like boppers. I was a bopper. I would, bubblegum jeans and what have you. I don't think I ever got like full 80s, but I definitely had the hair.
I just love the 80s music. I cannot wait to have a night of 80s music and dance.
Oh, it's going to be good. Okay.
Yeah.
What are we talking about today, Diana?
So last week we were talking about just really learning to move into fully accepting who you are. And I felt like this week we needed to continue that conversation. We talked about it at the end of last session, because there is a really rich opportunity here to go deeper into self-acceptance and personal acceptance than people might just understand on a surface level. And so I would love to talk about that. And it sort of has to do with masculine and feminine traits, which we all have. But having been brought up in the environments we were brought in, we were often served toxic components of those energies, masculine, feminine energy. And then all of that is rooted in what we call shadows, which we'll get into a little bit as well. So that's what I'm thinking. And I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, to me, that's the self-acceptance is just this culmination of the self-knowing, right? The awareness and understanding yourself. I had this really great conversation yesterday with a fellow who is kind of in his 50s and at that point too right now, where he's going. I asked him the question. I said, how well do you think you know yourself? And he said, on a scale of 1 to 10, 6.5, right? So the first step is to really figure out, quite honestly, who you are and what you believe in and what you want to have and your values and who you are as an individual. And then we get to decide, work on that. That's totally good with you. Like, does it mean that we don't have things we're striving for in terms of goals and self-improvement and that sort of thing? But the acceptance, I think, is such a key place to get to, because then you can grow from a very calm and intentional place, as opposed to from a place of need or shame or resentment or not being enough, right?
Love that you said that, because those places of need and shame and not enough is exactly what we're talking about when we talk about the shadow parts of ourselves. And I was also coaching a man last night, and he is struggling with his capacity to communicate clearly and confidently in his leadership role. And so we started talking about shadows. And I said, and I knew a little bit about his history. I knew that when he was 7, 8, 10, 12, he wouldn't put up his hand in class when he didn't know what was expected. He wouldn't ask for clarification. He wouldn't admit that he didn't know. And so I knew that part of him, that he had denied that part of himself that could not know. And he was masking with like having it all together, which, this is why we're having this conversation, because it's time to put down the mask. And I said, what is the one thing that triggers you the most? And this is really relevant, because the only way we can know our shadows is by knowing that which triggers us the most. And it took him a while to come up with it, but what he said was essentially inauthenticity. People who are not truthful, people who are not honest. So I said, inauthenticity. He said, yes. I said, okay. So tell me a time that you were inauthentic. And we had just talked about the 7-year-old who wouldn't put up his hand to admit that he didn't know the answer. I thought he would go there, but he actually went into a story of his 30-year-old self who stayed in a relationship way longer than he needed to, that really had an impact on his mental health and was unhealthy for both of them. And he recognized that as being his inauthentic self. And I said, okay, so now the work starts. If inauthenticity is your shadow, it's the part of you that you don't want to see, acknowledge, own, or admit to anybody, including yourself, then the work becomes, how do we integrate inauthenticity, which we all hold a seed of? How do we integrate inauthenticity with light and love? And that's the beautiful work of shadow, where when we can do that, we can come fully into acceptance with all parts of us. And all parts of us get an invitation to the table of our lives. And only then can we be in fullness, wholeness, or completion.
And so that's a very complete, view of acceptance, because, accepting the things we don't like about ourselves is, that's leveling up, right? I think there's also, though, this piece of self-acceptance, which is about accepting that you are right here, right now. Mm-hmm. And even if there are things that you want to improve, we can run into this really, really like difficult cycle to get out of, where it's not necessarily that it's something about us that we don't like, but we're also just never satisfied with where we are right now, usually because we have a narrative that we always have to be better or different. And so I think like just the acceptance of yourself exactly as you are right now, even if it's not like, I don't like this part about myself, but just the I always have to be different or better. That's, I think, as much of a challenge to sort of contend with as accepting the pieces of ourselves that we're not quite happy about, right? Mm-hmm. And I know it's a little bit of like a nuance, it's a little bit different, but I see them as two different things, like the perpetual always having to be better, and the things that we actually like do not like about our history or ourselves or our things that we have done, right?
Yeah, and I think it comes down to like, what is the intention behind that bettering? So many people, and women and men equally, we have feminine shadows, we have masculine shadows, we have feminine toxic conditionings, we have toxic masculine conditioning. And what I imagine is that what you're talking about is kind of a little bit of a masking, like wanting to do better. It's not about wanting to be the best part of yourself. It's not wanting to show others, the fear of showing others that I'm not perfected. And that's the tension with my client last night. That's the tension that leads him to being incapable of communicating with clarity. I had actually 2 male clients yesterday. I could tell you about the other one in a moment. Communicating with clarity, with sharpness, and then really setting the goals for his life based on that really clear understanding. So for women, feminine shadows could be like, emotional overwhelmed, indirect communication, like almost like hinting without clearly speaking, over pleasing, sometimes overly seducing or seductive, or trying to get attention. Like those are all what we would call feminine shadows. And there's nothing wrong with them as long as we can integrate them and we realize that over pleasing depletes me. And yet I can see with understanding, compassion, and so much like, oh my gosh, poor little you, like not poor in a victim's way, but I understand that that was the way that I was raised, and I had to become self-sufficient because that's what was welcomed. And it led to my over pleasing, or so for some people, it leads to not giving a shit about other people. So we carry all of these. And then the toxicity comes through as like passive aggressive, exclusion, weaponized vulnerability. So vulnerability is beautiful, but weaponized vulnerability, and that like I'm a victim and you hurt me, is a weaponized vulnerability. And and sometimes like emotional or even some moral superiority around the feminine. So I'm going to pause there because it's a lot to look into. And I think that this wanting to be better, I think what we have to be really clear about is like, what's wrong with where we are? We are such a society of, we're so conditioned to have to do more, be more, accumulate more, and all of that. And I'm going to put my spiritual hat on here. At the end of the day, we're all going to die with nothing. And so what is the cost that we are putting ourselves under to do more, to be more? And then how can we look at the shadows that create the toxicity? And a lot of the doing, by the way, is masculine toxicity. It's not feminine toxicity. And it's a masculine shadow, not a feminine shadow. How do we do that?
And so I'm going to bring up something a little bit different. And it's a yes and.
Yeah.
So we talk about these parts of ourselves and who we are, but there's also what's happened and like things we can't change.
Yeah.
That we also have to get to a point of accepting. Like, I am the best. I am so good. Like, we're talking like professional level expertise at beating myself up about what I've done in the past or that I haven't done.
Mm-hmm.
And this constant dialogue about how horrible I am for, some choice I've made or what have you. The second point I wanted to make was that I think that there exists a narrative that affects self-acceptance, which is, it's not even like strive to be better, but it's like, if I say I accept myself, if I say that I like who I am, it comes across, it's perceived, at least I think in our generation, it's perceived as egotistical for women, as, self-congratulatory. And we're not supposed to be that. We're supposed to be nice. We're supposed to be humble. We are never supposed to be okay with who we are. We grew up that way. I grew up that way. I was like, to say I like myself or I'm good at this or whatever was considered to be egotistical, bragging, So I think there's also that women, probably men too, are battling with when they think about self-acceptance, that we are not supposed to be that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Me too, by the way. Me too, just like me. I feel like I lived until, like, I can remember the day that I was able to really recognize first, like the recognition. So we can't accept what we can't see. We have to hold it so that we can then pull it in, integrate it, and let it no longer control us. That's the shadow work. I was at a retreat in Amsterdam in 2017, and it was all around, I was training to be a circle facilitator. And this particular couple of days was all around shadows. And the shadow that we started with was a shadow of anger. I did not have anger. I would say to people, I don't have an ounce of anger in my body. I'm a yogi. Something bothers me, I go flow it out. I'm here to help. I'm here to serve. There's no room for anger in that narrative because anger was not welcomed in my existence growing up. It wasn't safe for me to feel anger. And in fact, when I felt anger from my father, it was super weaponized and dangerous. When I expressed anger, I would get punished for it. It was usually like a slap across the face. So I learned very quickly that anger is not welcomed. And the only thing that was welcomed was my being bright and happy and light and in service and really believing that I'm here on this planet to do that. And yet, what happens when something's happening that's wrong in my life or in the world? How can I connect with that in a healthy way? And this is where the shadows come in. So in 2017, here I am in a circle, and the theme is anger. And these women are expressing rage, and the men are expressing rage. And I am literally shrinking into a tiny little ball. I am so scared and triggered by this. And I knew anger was a shadow of mine because anytime anyone raised a voice, I would turn in. I would get really triggered by it. So that's the fastest way to know your shadow. And so over the week, I was able to tap into little bits of anger, things that were not okay in the world. And there's a practice that goes, it's not okay that. It's not okay that my mom was addicted to Valium and asleep on the couch when I came home at the age of 6. It's not okay that my mom set me up to wait until my father gets home for doing something ridiculously small, and I would get woken up and hit on the rear end with a strap. It's not okay that my ex-husband did this. It's not okay that the politicians are doing that. It's not okay. It's a whole list of not okays. Well, that creates a way to look at anger through the lens of getting really clear. So anger leads to clarity when it's not weaponized. Now, we have toxic masculinity in the world today, and we have, I'm going to say particularly men, but women do it too, that are raging, and it's never okay, and it's never healthy when it's directed towards someone else, ever. But what that retreat showed me was that when I could tap into my anger, the greatest thing happened is I actually expressed it, and I looked around the women and men that were in the room with me, and they just kind of went, oh, it feels good to feel that from you. Like, that's your truth. That's your authenticity. That's there too. And so all of a sudden I had a reprogramming about what it would be like to express anger. Instead of being met with punishment, I was met with acceptance and love. And the acceptance of those other people allowed me to accept that in myself. And then full circle coming back, how does that show up in my life and in the world? If I can be really clear about what triggers me through the emotional range of anger, that becomes a boundary for me. And I know that that's something that you're really good at, Steph, like probably much better than I am. And my daughter's really good at, much better than I am. So I have to keep working on that. It's like, ooh, there's something in me there that's like triggered a little bit. What's the boundary? And when I can do that, I am bringing into acceptance the part of me that I was told at a very young age was not welcomed in this planet. So I think we're saying the same thing, in that we've been conditioned to not accept all parts of us. And I am so on board for let's bring it on. Show me the parts of me that I'm not aware of. Like, I've got blind spots like everybody else. And I want to welcome those blind spots and imagine sitting at a table, and every one of them has a chair, and every one of them has a purpose, and every one of them has a gift, as long as I don't weaponize it towards another.
So bringing it back to this time of our lives, right?
Yeah.
And why self-acceptance
Yeah.
is starting to become much more real for us right now. And, we keep coming back to a lot of stuff is sort of falling off our tables now. And it gives us the time and space to think about this.
Yeah.
But I also believe, and if anybody who's listening or has listened to us in the past, Diana brings a very spiritual and kind of deep practice around all of these topics. And for me, I like to look at them. I also do that work, but I like to look at them also from, sort of a practical perspective, and some, from somebody who's not as immersed and deep, that I think this is accessible for both areas. Like if the spiritual stuff is just not, you haven't gotten there yet, or you haven't been exposed to it yet, I think there's also an opportunity for you to sort of lean into self-acceptance without, having to learn all of the other tools. And I think about my own experience there. It was almost a narrative around, like, I did a lot of work around asking myself questions and asking myself what the impacts are of the narrative I keep continuing about why I'm not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
What is that doing to my life in a very practical way?
Mm-hmm.
What is that causing me to feel on an ongoing basis? And how does that get in the way of everything I want? So coming back
what's the cost of that?
Yeah. And coming, like, sort of similar to what you were saying, but in just really straightforward, sort of practical terms,
Yeah.
what, when you have to ask yourself that question, what am I getting? I did a lot of work of the Byron Katie's work, right, a long time ago. And the questions that she asks in the work are like, is this true? And of course, you're going to be like, oh, yeah, it's totally, of course. And then the second question is, can you prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is true? And then you're like, And usually the answer is no. So then you get to ask yourself, oh, I'm getting feedback, like an echo. I don't know why.
I don't hear it.
Oh, okay.
Maybe turn your phone off if it's on.
No, my phone's not on.
Okay.
Anyway, I think it's gone now. Yeah. Okay, it's gone. It's weird, little ghost. Usually the answer to can I prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's true is no, right? Because these are stories we make up for ourselves, and so on. So then the question is, what would life be like if I didn't have these thoughts? If I wasn't telling myself these things? And then you start really thinking about this. I'm like, man, it would be great. Well, the circle there is, it's me who's creating them.
Yeah. And so it's you who can change it. And this is, I think we're saying the same thing. I love Byron Katie's work. I find it's a lot of the times it's surface work. It's just, it's the belief of change your thoughts, change your life. But that often that's dealing with the cognition. But so much of what we've gone through in life is patterned in our bodies and in our nervous system. So when we change our thoughts, of course, we change our nervous system, and that has a different impact on the body. We reduce some of the stress, some of the tension, all those biochemicals. So what I'm talking about is probably a little bit more science-based and psychology-based than spiritual, because it's rooted in the work of Carl Jung, who's one of the first, really impactful psychologists in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, about that we have so much that is not in our awareness. It's below the surface of our awareness. It's like the iceberg, 2/3 of it's below the ocean. You can't see it, and yet it runs your life. And Carl Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will continue to run your life, and you will make it fade. And unconscious can't be accessed through mind. Unconscious has to be accessed through the body. So that's where it goes. Like, I still want to consider it practical and just like a little bit deeper. Like if some of the people listening have been going, I've done that. I've talked myself through it. I've tried to change my language. I've changed my narrative. And, I'm a big advocate of change your language. Like if you say the word worry constantly, you're going to have worry chemicals in your body. There's no doubt about it. And yet there's a time where I feel maybe it's because I'm so passionate about this work. And I use the lens of this work in everything I do and everyone I work with. I feel like if we want to go deeper and really get fully self-accepting, and we have the time in the Middle Ages because things have fallen away that have created a little more space, it's like, I just want to say now's the time, and enjoy it. Like, this isn't confronting work. This is like really juicy work, because your life force is trapped in your body when you can't go there and see what's sitting there. The life force is trapped in your body. Life force is your joy, your happiness, your abundance, all of that stuff. And so when we can start to unravel that, unkink it, get familiar with it, literally hold that part of me. For me, one of my shadows is being needy. I do not want to ask people for help. I do not, I cannot, I don't appreciate people who are needy. I get triggered by it. And it's like, oh, can I love that part of myself that's like really young and needy? And that's my work.
So let me ask this question. I've got the echo again. When people are resistant to accepting themselves, where's that coming from, and how do we get past it?
Mm-hmm. It's early conditioning. There are parts of oneself that were not welcome. So the conversation I was having yesterday was, 2-year-olds. 2-year-olds have really specific self-expression. It's called a temper tantrum, right? That's how 2-year-olds express themselves. And they say no. And as parents of 2-year-olds, if we're not aware, we might say, what do you mean no? What do you mean you're having a freak out? We're in the middle of a store. What are people going to think? Go and sit in the car and I'll come when I'm done, or go sit on the stairs, or go to your room. And, we do this for all ages, we meaning parents, unless we know differently. So that 2-year-old, if we bring it just down to the 2-year-old and the critical developmental stage of a 2-year-old, which is, I need to express myself, but the cost of expressing myself is my parent who sends me to my bedroom, to the stairs, or away. The cost of expressing myself comes with the loss of that connection with my parent, i.e. loss of love. So this is, Gabor Mate talks a lot about this. So if I punish my toddler for expressing themselves, my toddler will pretty soon stop expressing themselves, because they're sent away, their love is cut off, and they will always choose love, because love is survival over self-expression. And so that toddler was me. 58 years later, I'm having to learn how to express myself and how to love the parts of myself that can be expressed fully, and that my voice is needed. But it's all part of, like, that conditioning sat in me for probably about 40 years, really, really strongly. And it's not because, like, I want to think my parents didn't mean to do it, and parents who use timeout and stares and all that stuff, get away from me. I can't be in the presence of your anger, which is a toddler expressing themselves. Like, let's just assume they don't know any differently. But people listening now, and especially at this age, you might have grandparents, you might have young children, you probably more likely have grandchildren. And this is a really healthy expression, saying no, expressing themselves. And our job is to help shape that expression into something that's, the word that comes up is maybe a little more acceptable to society, a little more digestible to society. But I think that all these parts of us that we don't accept, we've simply learned at some level unconsciously, remember, below the surface, that they're not okay. And only when we can start to name them, like that man yesterday, he named the fact that he's triggered by inauthenticity. And he named a situation where he actually was inauthentic. Now he can say, well, that's not separate from me. That is me too. And what was the gift of that? The gift of that is it taught him how to, in the case of the partnership, the gift of being inauthentic, as he reflects on it now, not at the time, as he reflects on it now, is, oh, I've learned what's really important for me in relationship, and what's really important for the other in relationship. And then the gift of inauthenticity for his 7-year-old who couldn't put up his hand, as he reflects on it now, is it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay not to be perfect. It's okay to take off the masks. So I think we're saying the same things. The conditioning is really heavy when it comes to shadows. And we all have shadows. Doesn't matter. Like, the biggest spiritual gurus have the biggest shadows. I will just call that out. The biggest people on stage who project light and I've got it all together have the biggest shadows. I have big shadows. I have to work on my shadows and just bring them into right relationship with my life.
What's the risk of self-acceptance?
The risk of
Like,
self.
what's the so let me say that differently.
Great question.
What's the perceived risk
Mm.
of self-acceptance?
That not everybody's going to like who you might start to accept and become. That and I don't think of self-acceptance as ego. I think of self-acceptance as really deep heart work, like really deep heart work. As you become more authentically who you are and calling back all parts of yourself and stand in your authenticity, some people aren't going to like that. And I don't know for sure, Steph, but I feel like that was my experience with my last husband. I feel like as I stepped more and more into my authenticity and speaking my truth, which also came with boundaries. Okay, so let's call self-acceptance just like being in my truth. That came with boundaries. That came with that's not my being able to say that's not okay. And I reflect back, and I probably didn't even do that enough as I'm the last few weeks been sharing a little bit more with my family some of the things that I tolerated. It's gonna repel people. It's gonna they're gonna not want to be around you as much. And that's, I think, the risk. I don't think there's a risk to one's personal. I think the risk is to other people who are used to you being the person doing the work. A little bit less clear about who you are, what you'll tolerate in life.
So I think
And I want to say one more thing. As we uncover other shadows, because there's shadows around sensuality and sexuality, and that might come through on a dance floor, and that might be triggering for other women who are not able to be in that self-expressed stage of their lives as well. And then it comes the point in the Middle Ages where we just say, I don't give a fuck.
so. My friend Marissa, my friend, colleague, long-term co-collaborator, Marissa is watching right now. She just commented, "Yes, everything is a mirror." Now, Marissa and I have been through all of the life coach training together, and we have coached together for many years. And so she'll be really familiar with all of the things that I've been saying. And Marissa is a certified life coach herself, and she's awesome. And she does all the mindset stuff, mindset coaching for our business. But I think this comes back to all of the stuff that we deal with our clients as well, because they have all of these same thoughts around, what do I become if I change my self-deprecating narratives? Because those to me they were safety, and they were
Mm,
a way of deflecting um the things that I'm actually afraid to sort of encompass and own. And the thoughts around, if I accept myself, what's going to happen to me? Are
mm,
people going to like me less? Am I going to become a different person? That's so uncomfortable for people,
mhm,
because especially at this age, we are entrenched in
mhm,
who we are and what we've become and our identity in the rest of the world.
mhm,
So when I say I'm actually just gonna, I've been noticing a lot in the last few years about how the company that I keep, and in certain circles, there is, this comes back to money too. Like in certain circles, there is a real pattern of being self-deprecating, of complaining. And it's not because they're negative people, but because that's safe.
Well,
And
that's also what
that's
we call toxicity, right? That's the masculine feminine toxicity that's rooted in the shadows.
okay.
Yeah.
So this is fear based, right?
Yeah.
It's the fear of, if I make these changes, who do I become?
Mhm.
If I stand up for who I am, who do I lose? How does my identity change? There is a lot of fear around self-acceptance, because it means change. It means becoming a different person. It means like facing up to things that, if if I accept exactly who I am, it means I don't accept things that I have been accepting before.
Not only don't accept,
Boundaries.
but cannot accept things that I accepted before.
That's right.
It would be
That's right.
so against, at my core, what feels like truth, that it becomes impossible to accept and tolerate things that you might have tolerated before. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. And so the space that we gain when we're in this phase of our lives
Mm.
is also a very like a scary place. It's a
Yes.
scary place because we're no longer defining ourselves by what other people want and need, and
Yeah.
we have to define ourselves by what we want and need. And it's easier to say, oh, you know, I do these things or I have these things or I become these things because of this obligation I have to someone else or to my role in life. And now we're left on our own to sort of sit and start thinking. And I think this is where people start making themselves really busy
Hmm.
because there's distraction. And
Hmm.
I don't have the time to sit there and face. And it's not even that it's a bad thing, but just, can I just be happy exactly where I am right now? I remember when I finally crossed that bridge, and like there's so much resistance to it because it's like, oh, but I've got to be better. Like there's so much wrong with me and I've got to be better. But then when I can just, God, is it liberating to just sit there and say, this is exactly how things are right now.
Yeah.
Does it mean that things won't change or can't change or I can't work towards something else? No. But I'm like, I'm okay. I'm okay right now. Just this is what it is.
Yeah.
And that need to change, that need to make it different. It's different to say I want to work towards something versus I have to change
Yeah.
something because it's not good.
Hmm.
All that energy does is cause us to live in stress and anxiety.
The energy of I have to change something.
Yeah, I have to change something because it's not good or it's not
Mm-hmm.
as good as it should be,
Mm-hmm.
rather than, hey, I'd love to work towards this. But I'm also totally like accepting that everything is just as it is right now. And everything that has happened. And I can do some learning from it. I can do some rumination on it. But right now, all I've got is right now.
Yeah.
And right now has to be good enough and it has to be okay. And I can also be on a path to something else.
Yeah.
But those things can both be true,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's exactly what I was going to say. Is both realities can be simultaneously occurring. Um, I think that the I have to change something usually comes when people hit some kind of bottom, some kind of rock bottom, like that urgency of something has to be different. I've gone through that a few times in my life. I have to change something. And and then, I still have to put one foot in front of the other. I still know that something in my life is going to change. And for me, there's like such an embodied feeling of when something has to change. I get that. And yet I still have to like get up and make my coffee and go to work and put one foot in front of the other. It doesn't mean that I have to go into like a treatment facility for 6 months to change. Some people might choose to do that. No judgment. I feel like a lot of what you've mentioned, I took a few notes because the reality is change is always happening. Like that's just a constant in life. And I think the risk of I have to change something with the urgency that might come with that comes with more tension, which is what you mentioned. Instead of sitting, but it's also not just passively sitting back and letting change happen. And we know that women in the Middle Ages, particularly women in the Middle Ages, there is a high rate of divorce. They're no longer willing to tolerate what they tolerated before. And I imagine that the men that they're with, that they're choosing to leave, would find this so confronting. It's like, what's wrong with this lady, with this woman? We had such a great life. She did this and I did this, and it worked for so long until it didn't work. And this is where I have to change something because it's not working anymore. And the reason it's not working anymore is because it's confronting our sense of authenticity. When we have the time and we have the space and we get to reflect and we get to challenge our thoughts and we get to see a different future for ourselves and get curious about what that future might look, feel, and be like, then what we're in may no longer be tolerable unless the person we're with is willing to be a co-creator in that change journey.
Yeah, and
So,
that's the whole risk around self-acceptance. I'm actually going to disagree with you on something here that that need for something has to change comes only when you're at rock bottom. I actually think it's the opposite. I actually think that that is so pervasively constant that that we've been trained to believe that we're never quite enough, that we are never quite good enough, that there's always got to be something that changes, and we're so conditioned to look at what's wrong
absolutely.
rather than say, hey, there's a whole bunch of reasons that I got to where I am right now, and those were good reasons,
Mhm.
right? And it doesn't mean that I can't be on a path to something else, but like I know all the reasons I got here, and I just accept them. Like I accept that that's what happened, and I accept that there are reasons that choices I made in the moment that needed to be made, and I accept that you know whatever. It just is, like, that's what it is. So,
Mhm.
there's the saying, there's the I forget if this was Buddhist or whatever it was, but living in the past is depression,
Mhm.
and living in the future is anxiety.
Mhm.
And the most calm place to be is right here, right now. And that is a very, very, very hard mindset to get into because we
Yeah.
are so conditioned to be like, we either have to like beat ourselves up about what happened or be worried about what we're going to create.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes what happens is we get uncomfortable in life and we think there's something wrong. And I just really feel like maybe we didn't sign up for comfort. I really believe that we all sign up personally. I signed up for my own, I had my own sacred contracts for this journey of being in my body as Diana for this lifetime. And man, there's been times that it's been uncomfortable. And can we be okay and be in the discomfort without making it wrong? And if we can do that, then there's a level of acceptance that comes with that. So that acceptance doesn't just come when we're feeling content and sitting by the fire and the bills are paid and all of that. Like, can we accept all the parts of our lives? And I think this is sort of that's the shadow, and that's the looking at the toxicity and all of that. Like, life isn't always going to be comfortable, but authenticity and acceptance really go side by side. And can we accept this moment as it is? And absolutely, this moment is all we have. The power of now, it's all we have. But we get so conditioned in going back into regrets, and regrets lead to depression, going forward into anxiety, which is rooted by fear. And we miss the moments and we miss the opportunities and we miss the growth happens right here and now. We can set all the goals, but something might change tomorrow that side rails me. And it's like, okay, can I be okay where I am right now?
I just have a question for you.
Mhm.
Are you going to be okay being Dirty Diana tonight?
Am I going to
Or
be okay being what?
Dirty Diana at our 80s party?
Oh my goodness, yes, I'm looking forward to it.
And are you going to accept yourself in that temporary state of being?
I'm not even sure it's a temporary state of being, Steph. too,
So
too much information. I really like what I love about the 80s. So I was checked out in the 90s and the 90s grunge. Like, I think had I been more present in the 90s, I probably would have been there. But in the 90s, I was having babies, I was doing career, I was in a different place, and I was really like so caught up in new country. So I missed that whole era. But in the 80s, like, I love it's almost like every night was like a costume party. I loved it. And so I look forward to that because that's me getting to play out that shadow part of me, that dirty Diana. And you've seen me on the dance floor, you and I both, like, we can get pretty crazy and intense on the dance floor. It's like, that's fun. And when young women come up to me on the dance floor and say, like, how do you do that? It's like, oh, do what? I said, how do you dance? So, like, unapologetically, it's like, I don't know, there's a switch that comes up in me and that's that's the acceptance. Like, that's me too. And then the next day I go and teach yoga and I'm calm and I bring out my Shiva consciousness energy. It's like, that's me too, right? This is the acceptance of all parts
Yeah.
of us. And it took me
Yeah.
long time to
Yeah.
get there.
Me
And
too.
and it's fun.
Yeah, and I don't think, we've talked about this before. I'm just one of those. I'm a person who has never had the burden of feeling like I need to be something for someone else,
Yeah.
or worrying about judgment or anything like that. Like, I have always been a very multifaceted person, and I'll just do whatever makes me happy, or whatever I feel like I want to do, or I'll show up in some way and that sort of thing. But I really embrace that now. Like, I really love that dichotomy that I have. I really love all these different weird parts of myself, and I'm so unapologetic about it.
Yeah.
So unapologetic. I'm the business coach that's going to show up and talk to you like a human being, or I'm the CMC mentor who's going to show up and just talk to you about, I don't know, roller skating or something like that. Like, i- that is self-acceptance, when we can be exactly what we want to be and be unapologetic about it.
Yeah.
So
And I
that's what
think
we're going to do tonight. We're going to be unapologetically 80s. Okay,
yeah.
good conversation. Probably a good place for us to shut it down. What are
Mhm.
we talking about next week?
Let's powwow tonight while we're dancing, and we'll set something up for our audience.
Okay, you are all in for a treat next next week, because whatever's going to come out of our 80s night tonight is going to be our next topic. All right,
Yeah.
Dinah,
Thank you
thank you
so
for
much, my
being
friend.
here.
Thanks for listening. If anyone has any suggestions of what you'd like us to talk about in the Middle Ages, we are so open to hearing your feedback and
Yeah,
suggestions.
tell us your stories. Tell us what comes up for you and what you've learned as somebody in these years, because I'll tell you, it's glorious.
It is glorious. It is
Yeah.
glorious. Absolutely. Have a great afternoon, my friend. I'll see you on the dance floor.
Thanks for listening to The Middle Ages. If you love this episode, follow the show, leave a review, and share it with someone who's rewriting the rules of midlife too. Because around here, we believe midlife isn't the end of anything. It's the start of everything. See you next time.